David, thank you very much. Let's just, before I get onto the panel, as I said, I was going to kind of flip back and forth. That's a very interesting point, and I'm going to kind of pick on Arthur here and have him kind of, and I may give you a few seconds to think through this. This whole issue of labor that gets stuck in the middle. How do you see the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the role that BCLC can play in actually thinking about how do we educate our AmChams and other organizations that are out there around some of these problems, and these problems exist around the world. So I'm going to give you a little time to think through this, Arthur, and I'm going to come and ask you to respond to that. But in the meantime, I'm going to move to Salvatore to say how the Grameen Foundation and the work that you pioneered in microfinance, working at the lowest level with people, how is that leading to now innovative models of businesses that are coming up, and how you are partnering with corporations to really make that happen?
This is exactly the question I was hoping that you'd ask, because over the past 12 years, Grameen Foundation has worked very hard at the local level, but we've done that work because of the support we've been able to get largely from the private sector, either in terms of the foundations who provided us with financial support over the years, or through the skills and expertise and talent of the employees in these organizations. And I think to go back to your original question, which was what doesn't work, what we've seen is when corporate philanthropies are separate from the business interests of the corporation, then it makes it much harder. Certainly the funding is good, the money supports a lot of not-for-profit organizations doing good in the world. But I think what sets us apart and why we've been as successful as we have been is because we've been able to focus on those corporations and key into the skills and expertise of specific organizations, and then use our own internal expertise, marry that to try and address some of the roadblocks to development, and focusing on the poor and the poorest of the poor in all of these markets. And that's worked both in the field of microfinance and technology, which are the two sort of large tools that we're using to try and address poverty alleviation in the world. Some of our technology programs are wonderful examples of that, and we've benefited in large part from organizations either who've given us senior executives to sit on advisory boards, looking at how to develop products that address some of these roadblocks, some of these impediments to development, that look at look at where the real business opportunities might exist in technology for development that expands broadband access in a rural market. There was a recent Economist article that said that I think it was 75%, I may have the numbers wrong, 75% of the mobile phones in the world exist in emerging markets. So how do you leverage that platform? How do you expand it? How do you leverage that platform to provide meaningful services to the poor and the poorest? So we think about providing access to financial services for the poor. We think about providing access to information and communication technologies. But we're looking now at some exciting innovations with strong support from the corporate sector on how do we, using a mobile phone platform, how do we look at data transmission that will affect the lives of the poor, focused in areas of agriculture, focused in areas of maternal and child health care, focused in all sorts of different fundamentally practical areas that will allow the poorest to become economic actors.
At least those that are blogging, I actually want you to focus on the first statement that was made, that as a leading NGO, they're actually interested in corporations that are not doing philanthropy for the sake of philanthropy, but is actually tied to their core competencies. We as corporations get tremendous amount of flack in the media for doing that, because in most cases people look at it and says we are actually serving our self-interest and not investing in the community. So that's actually a very interesting dichotomy that gets set up, and as you can see, we practice this so well that we can actually lead this right into the next question with Scott and Cisco, that has actually done this in a phenomenal way over the last 20 years in terms of their investments that have actually gone to both helping develop the labor market and talent pool, but has also done it in a way that actually brings out their core competencies. So Scott, it's all yours.
Well, thanks for that kind of a setup. It makes it's relatively easy, but I would characterize our experience in the last 20 years as a journey in humility. the humility of how far can technology transform lives. Our corporate saying, and it's taken very seriously, is that we will transform how we live, work, learn, and play. It's one thing to do that in the United States, it's one thing to do that in Great Britain, and it's another thing entirely to do that in Kazakhstan. And I'd like to also go back to the evolution of where CSR fits into the core business values of the company. To Mary's point, if a company looks at a CSR activity and says, can I afford to lose money over that? It means CSR is an afterthought. For those where CSR is part of the corporate culture, then it is an investment. So it really, it does come down to that. Now, to your earlier question, Akhtar, about where do we fail, and there's only a few ways to get it right, and there's many, many ways to fall off the track. A lot of times that in the evolution of our business model away from developed countries into the developing world, we tend to make an abstraction of our customer. It's just another, it's okay, the business model has to have a few constants, and therefore there is a customer. That customer can be Russia, it can be Kazakhstan, it can be Congo, it can be Brazil, you name it. But we think so much of the what, sometimes we don't think of the how. Because when we talk about connected schools, and connected hospitals, and connected security, and connected governments, and connected citizen-centric services, we need to understand the actual conditions into which these prevail. And this is where we're dealing in societies where decisions around power are very much part of a long-term organizational culture, and they're usually not transparent, and they're usually not accountable. And we, in many ways, are trying to be disciples of exactly transparency, accountability, and responsibility so that our models scale and we get the promise of connectivity as we have it. So not only has our business model been challenged, but our CSR model. Yes, we've had success, and the best thing we've done is to divorce it from initially the questions around the business model and say, let us invest in the human capacity and let us be educated therefrom. And that has really guided and shaped the business model and brought the CSR theme very closely with the business model of how Cisco engages in emerging markets.